Hey, lovely people. um, we are up to episode 4 now, which is called Damned If You Don't. That seems like a pretty um, obvious title for this episode, I guess, because it involves somebody who has to make a decision and it's a lose-lose. So this time the episode is about the sheriff calling in a favor, and we're much more settled into sort of like a routine or whatever of what the show is going to be about. All the major pieces are in place. And yeah, I would say this is kind of like a Monster of the Week episode, which by that I mean it's kind of like an X-Files terminology, but with that show they would have like the overarching story, and then they'd have like some episodes would just be like more self-contained, and that would be called like a Monster of the Week by the writers room. And that's kind of what this is. It's like we learn a little bit, but it's not really furthering the over narrative. It's more a bit more of a self-contained story, and I think this is such a good episode. It's really I don't know, I was gonna say like kind of a juicy episode where it's just like it reminds me a little bit of maybe like an Edgar Allan Poe kind of a plot line, even though the location is quite different to anything you would see in Edgar Allan Poe. It's kind of like this inevitable, the devil's out to get you, and it's a rock and a hard place and all that kind of thing. So anyway, we open on the junkyard of the town, and it's nighttime. And we just get Caleb and a couple of the other boys from his class sort of playing hide and seek amongst the wreckage. And it's just a way of introducing us to the Bowen family, which is the mom, Etta, the pop, Carter, and the teen daughter, Poppy. She's 15. And Carter hears people messing around outside, and he's like, I'm not going to scold you. I'm just worried about your safety. And it's kind of designed to make us like him. If you guys have heard of the save the cat kind of phrasing, when you first meet a character, if they do something nice, it kind of signifies that they're a good guy. So we're meant to feel a bit sorry for them, which is interesting because actually, when you think about it, Carter isn't really a nice guy, but he's the protagonist of his story. So it's just kind of a neat way that they did that. He is worried that the kids are going to climb into a fridge to hide and get stuck in there and suffocate. So he's a caring man, apparently. But yeah, then we get Lucas Buck turns up, and he's here to call in a favor. He wants 15-year-old Poppy to work in his office, and we know that Lucas doesn't take no for an answer. So that's our main story. We get a little bit of Gail in this episode, which is nice. I always like her. Randomly, she's looking for a place to live, and she like sublets from this guy, and I thought she was staying at the boarding house, so maybe I got that a bit wrong. Her boss from her other newspaper calls, and she's like, I'm looking into something here, so she's obviously gonna stick around and investigate, but she's not giving up her job in the city or something. She heads out to the junkyard at one point for help with her air conditioner, and she has this amazing like 90s print slip dress that were so in the 90s. Anyway, she just has such great clothes, so get used to hearing about me commenting on her clothes. She sees her parents' car that she recognizes, and Carter tells her the car is jinxed. We get a little flashback of the sheriff pulling over her mom when she was a child, and her mom asks her to hide something, and he asks why she was speeding, and he's like, where's the fire? And I kind of like that, because that's such a Sheriff Buck like thing where we know that they died in a fire, and he knows in the flashback that he's probably, like it's, you can kind of see what I mean. He's such a good character. He's just so terrible. But anyway, what Gail finds that her mom asked her to hide was a key, so we don't know what the key is for, but that's a little bit of furtherance of her story. The sheriff keeps appearing everywhere in this episode, which I think is something that they're starting to build on a little bit, of him just like conveniently being places, which I think kind of adds to his sinister aspect in a really nice way. Yeah, and they have some sass talk, he and Gale. They seem to love just giving each other a little bit of sass, like all sort of smiles on the outside, you know? It's great. There's also a little short bonding scene with Gale and Caleb where she tells him a little bit about her parents' death, and they have some bonding time over catching crabs in the river, which is very cute. The other subplot that's quite nice before we get to the main one is the science fair. So the teacher, Selena, she asks Caleb about what project he's going to do for the science fair. He wants to do a thing on extreme weather. So this whole situation's been engineered by Lucas Buck so that he can kind of be like a tutor or a father figure to Caleb and hang out with him, have an excuse to hang out with him. Caleb's not really interested in that. There's a bit where the doctor and the sheriff are on the front porch with Caleb, and the sheriff's encouraging Caleb to cheat and just buy the project, and the doctor wants him to do the project correctly and offers him a book, and the sheriff's like, book reports are for sissies. Which I'm like, I don't know, I just find that so random. Like, okay, whatever. There's sissies with their book reports. Yeah, so basically they're like the angel and the devil on his shoulder in a way, encourage him. One says you can cheat, the other says, you know, read the book and learn the science and do the project right. So that's Caleb's little journey in this episode of just whether he's gonna do the project the right way or not. Merlin makes a quick appearance to encourage him to do the right thing. So she's here. It's always nice when we see her. Yeah, I think we're kind of meant to get the sense that maybe there could be a little bit of Lucas Buck in Caleb if he's not careful. But yeah, Caleb's side eye is like the best thing ever. Like, he's so adorable, and sometimes he's just like, you know, he's gonna do things his own way, and he gives this little like side eye. It's great. But yeah, basically Caleb ends up doing the project the wrong way and then disqualifying himself because he cheated. But then the doctor like is in the classroom watching him give his presentation, and he says, hey, like, tell them the actual principle behind the project. And he can, because he did read the book and actually do the work. So the doctor has won this round of like keeping Caleb honest, and the sheriff isn't happy about it. So we know there's going to be some kind of escalation there. So to get to our main focus of this episode, which is just such a good story, I think. So anyway, so we know that Lucas has turned up, and he mentions to Caleb that, Lucas turns up at the junkyard at night, and he talks to Carter, who is the owner of the junkyard, and he wants to call in a favor. He wants the 15-year-old daughter to work in his office, and we know that he's not going to take no for an answer. So we get some shots of the home that they live in, and it's a really nice, like, southern plantation style home, you know, with like the pillars at the front, like it's huge. So obviously the junkyard's doing way better than it should be. So we know he's sort of taking favors from Caleb. He's nervous about signing over protection of his daughter to the sheriff, that she'll be working with him. So he hesitates and doesn't sign the paper in time for the deadline. His wife gets electrocuted. And so Carter then, you know, is upset and talks to the sheriff, and the sheriff says, well, he's not going to undo anything and let the daughter work in his office anymore. This time he says, well, okay, since you know, didn't sign the paper in time to say that your daughter could work in my office, now I want you to just do this one little favor for me of picking up a friend and just take him back to your house. You know, it's all very simple. But the friend basically the friend that turns up is somebody that Carter knows. So we have this great like little intro moment. It's like so of that era. This pair of cowboy boots gets off a Greyhound bus, and so Greyhound bus, we know he's just come out of prison, and we get the cowboy boots and the long jeans and like up to his like a spider tattoo on his arm, and there's like this electric guitar music, like, so we know this guy is like very cool and very sinister. It's pretty great. So immediately we get the sense that there's some history between Carter and this guy. His name's Wash Sutpen, which I'm like, that must be like an anagram of something. So we learn that this guy is immediately latching on to the 15-year-old daughter. He's clearly a total creeper. But we also find out he's Carter's ex-boss. So suddenly, like, a little mention that at the start of the episode makes sense. So what the sheriff has done is he's gotten Carter to pick up a man who was in prison for killing someone, and the person that Wash killed was a man who was messing with his teenage daughter, but he killed the wrong man, and we realized that Carter creeped on Wash's daughter, so now Wash is gonna creep on Poppy, Carter's daughter. So this is kind of, I don't know what you would call it. Is that poetic justice? I don't know. It doesn't really matter because it's all gross. So yeah, it's such a good setup because he can't get rid of the guy because he's agreed to help out Sheriff Buck, and we know that something worse is going to happen if he messes this up. And also that Sheriff Buck helped him cover up that he was messing around with a teenage girl that was the daughter. Like, it's just so much grossness. I was kind of unsure whether Wash had figured out that Carter was actually the guy he should have killed, or like if he's being a creep on purpose or not. But Carter starts to see what's going on, and he gets more and more nervous. He tries to talk to the sheriff, but the sheriff won't help him. And he kind of says this line of like, you should do what any father would do, which is what Wash said about killing the man he thought was messing with his daughter. I hope this is all making sense. So then Carter starts to hear and see things, and he gets out his shotgun to like protect his daughter. But when he goes in to shoot Wash, he shoots someone that's standing over his daughter's bed, and it's actually his beloved wife, Etta. And Wash just walks away into the night, except that after about 3 or 4 steps, he actually just disappears. So other people didn't really see this guy other than one guy that, is an employee. So I was kind of like wondering to myself, like, was he ever there? Was it just the family that could see him? Either way, it was definitely a trick from the sheriff, and maybe Wash died in prison and was never there or something. I don't know. But at the very end, we get this little short scene of the sheriff asking the employee if he wants a loan to help him take over the business. And the sheriff says, like, down the road, I may ask you for a small favor. And I was like, oh my God, don't shake hands on it. But he does. So we know that something very similar is going to happen to this poor kid who just wants to, I don't know, take over the business. There's one kind of interesting thing here. There's a framing song. I think it's sung by like school children or something. But it's one of the old school murder ballads. There used to be a bit of a thing more in the past. I know, like, in the Appalachian kind of areas, they were like very popular, and it would just be like a murder case that was very talked about would be put to the tune of a song, and it was almost like kind of a way of spreading news, or like a keeping a folk story alive. But they were real murder cases, like put to music. And that's the framing device is one of those songs, and it's at the start and the end of the episode. I just thought it was kind of interesting because I think this, from the outside, what the town would see would just be that the guy that owns the junkyard shot his wife sort of for no reason. And that's the kind of thing that happens in these like murder ballads. So I just thought that was kind of an interesting little touch that they had there. Yeah, so I hope I explained that plot adequately there. I think it's really clever because something bad would have happened to Poppy if he'd signed the paper and let her work with the sheriff. Like, you know it. But the way he's tricked into shooting his wife and the way that it's kind of revenge because he messed with this guy's daughter, like, it's just so clever. So that's the main plot of this episode, and I think it's really good. So that's episode 4.